Museum of Natural History in France. Pacey and Mark, are you there?
Yes, we are here. Can you hear us?
Yes, we hear you very
And you see
well.
the sharing of the phone. Okay, great.
We also see the screen. Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, thank you still being here for the next talk. So now we are presenting naming practice in Mandarin Chinese. In Mandarin Chinese, there are no grammatical gender system like in Japanese, and there are no strict rules for naming children. Parents have the freedom to choose names like a beggar, or beautiful flowers, or even names with political connotations like established China. And these names often reflect the beliefs and the expectations of the parents, and they may represent the gender stereotypes. In this presentation, we'll provide an overview of naming practices in Mandarin Chinese and explore the most commonly used names for both genders from historical and contemporary perspectives. And finally, we will examine current trends in selecting neutral names. Okay, so in Chinese society, names classify and distinguish individuals, and they have transformative powers. They are also an important form of self-expression. Over time and across different cultures, names undergo changes and they mirror the prevailing values and ideas for their respective eras. In Chinese naming conventions, most given names comprise 2 characters following the 1-character family name. For example, my family name is Li, consisting of a single character, which is marked in blue, followed by a 2 characters given name, Peiqi, so which are marked in blue. In some cases, one of the characters in the given name may be shared among all the children of the same gender within a family generation. Take again my name, for example. The first character of my given name, Pei, is derived from the first character in the given names of my 2 elder sisters' cousins. And similarly, my brother's first character is Jian, which is taken from the first character of my elder brother cousin given name. So this practice helps establish a hierarchy and the gender relations within the family during one generation. Naming strategies in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and China may vary due to their cultural, historical, political, and linguistic factors. In terms of cultural influences, Taiwan has diverse cultural influences such as indigenous cultures and influences from Japan due to its colonial history, while Hong Kong blends Chinese and British influences. Besides, policies have also played a role in shaping naming strategies. For example, in China, the one-child policy was implemented in 1971, which led to an increase in single-character given names, as there was less need to repeat the first character for making relation between siblings, just as we just introduced. And this resulted in an increase of single character names, rising from 7.6% in the 1960s to 27.6% in the 1990s. However, population growth later led to an increase in duplicate names, causing longer 2-character given names to regain popularity. And currently, over 90% of names in China consist of 2 characters, while only 6.3% of given names has 1 character. In Taiwan, individuation of one's name is so important that the Taiwanese government has established a set of rules for name changes. For example, when 2 individuals sharing the same name in the same city or workplace, they may request a name change to avoid confusion. Besides, people might change their names when someone have names considered inelegant. For instance, if someone share a name with wanted criminals, or if the name carries negative connotations, they may request a name change. And finally, according to popular belief, names influence one's destiny. So some individuals change their names in pursuit of better luck. If life has been marked by a series of misfortunes, a name change may signal a fresh start. Names selected for girls and boys often reflect social expectations toward two genders. For example, girls' names are often associated with characters denoting beautiful, quiet, and soft images, while boys' names are conventionally linked to characters expressing strength, prosperous, or heroic image. And traditional view of preference for boys over girls is reflected in the choice of names for each gender. For instance, when a family has multiple daughters, they may name a girl Zhao Di, which means a bacon little brother, in the hope that she will bring a boy into the family. On the other hand, when a family has a son, and they may name him Tianci, which means rewarded by God, to express the parents' happiness to having a son. And finally, metaphor is also a crucial strategy when it comes to naming. Women are usually compared to beings or objects that are considered as feminine, such as water, flowers, and jade, and those components are often used to naming girls. While men are traditionally compared to those perceived as masculine, such as trees, metal, and big animals. So these elements are often used to naming boys. Here are our research questions. First, when naming strategies are currently what naming strategies are currently employed for gender-specific names in Taiwan, and how do they reflect social attitudes toward gender? And second, what are the most frequently used names for females and males over time, and how have these naming patterns evolved? And finally, how are neutral names being adopted in contemporary society, and what factors influence their selection in naming practices? Our data is derived from an analysis of Taiwan's national civil registration data, which includes about 23.5 million individuals sourced from the 2018 publication by the Ministry of Interior in Taiwan. And we examined the most frequently used names for both females and males from both diachronic and synchronic perspectives. In the synchronic view, we analyzed the 100 most common female and male first names, along with the 100 most common first names shared by both genders, which we categorize as neutral names. In the diachronic view, we examine the 10 most common female and male first names for each decade, spanning birth years from 1912 to 2018, resulting in 11 groups. It's worth noting that this data is derived from currently living individuals, so there are fewer names recorded for earlier periods compared to more recent ones. We examine the character frequency in relation to metaphoric usage, such as plants, animals, objects, and non-metaphorical attributes, such as beautiful or strong or quiet qualities. Additionally, we incorporated the character's radical to assess its potential influence on the selection of gender-specific or neutral names. For your reference, a Chinese radical is a graphical element that often serves as a semantic indicator similar to a morpheme. For example, characters sharing the radical women share a semantic connection, often related to female reference or concepts considered to be associated with female, such as beauty or jealousy. So take one example of our data. The character Ting is a character often used to naming girls. So we analyze this word in two levels. First one is from its character, and the meaning is pretty, attractive, graceful. So we categorize this character as non-metaphorical attribute. And second one, we take a radical of this character, which is 女, female. So next part, Mark will present gendered and neutral names from synchronic view and diachronic view.
So, hi everybody. Whoop, there we go. So in the next part, we're going to show a bit what the data looks like. So to start, first by giving some tables and then some graphs. So first, if you consider female names that are not categorized by metaphor, so technically, what does it look like in the data? So first, we have on the right some characters, so that could have direct meanings. So for example, you have a character that means beautiful, you have a character that means good looking, and then we compile them into major categories, as you can see on the left, which are beauty, virtue, positive traits, intelligence, emotion. So for example, in this case, for female names, we have in the category virtue, we have characters that mean chastity, that mean quiet, so that are virtues that are traditionally expected to be associated with female names. If we look at, again, so non-metaphor in names, but for males, so in the same way we get these main categories, which are personal achievements, esteeming erudition, virtue, family ethics, wealth, strength, intelligence, a lot of things that we found in other languages that we have seen today. And on the right, taking personal achievements as an example, you have characters that mean ambition, establishment, outstanding, heroic, etc. So I don't go through the whole list due to time, but you kind of have an idea of the general categories that can be used in male names here. If we look at female names where we find metaphor, so what does it actually look like? So let's say we have for the category plant, for example, we have characters that for me usually refer to flower names such as orchid or plum or hibiscus. Or for the category precious stone, you have a jade or beautiful green stone, etc. And the main categories are plant, precious stone, water, season, animals, and objects. So again, quite a few things that we have already seen cross-linguistically. Like I think the previous talk talked about season at some point with female names, for example. When we look at male names that are categorized by metaphors, again, we find animals such as, so we find animal, precious stone, plant, and water. So one thing that I forgot to mention, but I'll jump back to the previous slide. So when you look at female names, for example, or male names, sometimes we have the same subcategory, but the details inside can be different. So let's take animals here as an example. If you look at female names with metaphor, you have animals which are generally the phoenix. However, if you go to male names with metaphor, you don't find the phoenix there. However, you find the dragon. For precious stone with female names, we're finding jade or precious green stone, while for male names, you also find precious stone that is more something like gold here. For plants, the same. So with female names, we're finding flower names. So with male names, we also have plants. However, it's more likely to be trees rather than flowers. So you can also see some stereotypes that are being reflected there also in the categories. Now go to neutral names. What do we find there? So for neutral names where we don't have metaphor, so we do find some categories that we have already seen with male and female names. So we have virtue, esteeming erudition, personal achievement, intelligence, politics, etc. We do have new categories that were not seen before, such as two major ones. So the first one is equality. So we have, for example, a character that actually means equality that is more found in neutral names, but not found that much in female or male names. We also have much more function words that are found in neutral names because probably in our interpretation, because function words don't have a direct male or female connotation. They are more neutral in this sense. If we look at metaphors, so again, we have the major categories: animal, stone, plant, seed, and water. Again, if we look into the details, we have some some small differences. So here we don't have phoenixes or dragons for animals. However, we find more like body parts of animals, especially for birds. We have characters referring to feathers or flying. And for precious stones, for example, we find both types of stones, so either gold or jade, that are both used here. And finally, for plant, if you remember, for female names, what we had was more something like flower names. For male names, we had plants. And for neutral names, we have plants, but it's more plants that are usually not associated with either male or female, so such as bamboo that you find as neutral names. So we do see different strategies that are being used to try to differ, also in terms of season, as we have seen before. So that was the table. If we have just a few graphs to visualize the trends in general. So if we just look at the count, what we see is that, so on the left, starting with female names, so woman names, we have, so beauty, which is the most frequent one. For male, we have personal achievement, which is the more frequent one. So it kind of matches the cultural stereotypes that we talked about. For neutral names, what is interesting is first that we see personal achievements and beauty are there, but their ranking is much lower in comparison to male and female names. And what is on the top is more family ethics, virtue, positiveness. We also have a second interesting point. So these two new categories that we mentioned about equality or more abstract nouns that are also found in the ranking and are not extremely low either. So this is to give you an idea of the overall distribution. If we look at it through time, so here on the x-axis you have time, and on the y-axis you have the ratio of different types of meaning subcategories. On the left, if we look at names that have metaphors, what we see as a change of trend is that in the past it was more things like precious stone, but the closer we get to the present, the less frequent that becomes, while most names have kind of, if they are metaphors, they're mostly referring to plants, for example, or water. If we go to the right with names that don't have metaphor, the trends are even more visible. So in the past, for example, meaning kind of before 1970s, the two most frequent categories are the color brown and the color pink, which are referring to beauty and virtue. So for female names here. So these were really the stereotypes and cultural stereotypes that we had for females. And after 75, we see that there are two categories that grow bigger. So the first one is the purple, which is positiveness, and the second one is light green, which is family ethics. So we do see that across years or across decades it's getting bigger and bigger, which kind of shows, I think, in our interpretation, a change of trends of the society, and where that is also reflected in naming strategies, for example. If we go for male names, so on the left we have names with metaphors. So there is a hole in the data because in that period of time in the data, what we didn't see any names that had metaphors. So that's why there was a hole in there. But in general, we do see similar trends. So before we more like female names were mostly precious stones, but in the past, but the closer we get to the present, the more likely we are to see plants and water. So, plants in general. So that's also a similar trend. If we go to names that don't have metaphors on the right, what we see is, so kind of similar. In the past, we were more likely to have the light blue, which is personal achievements, and purple, which is strength. So some features that are typically associated with male stereotypes in the culture. However, again, after the 1970s, the closer we get to the present, so two categories get bigger and kind of squish these stereotypes away. So one is family ethics and the other one is virtue again. So that we kind of see a change within gender, but also across gender here, where there is this trend of change of naming strategies that we think kind of match with the change of what this society thinks about these issues. We were also interested in quantifying the diversity of different variables between male and females. So as some other presentations also talked about, like the previous one on Japanese also mentioned the difference of diversity between male and female. So what we used to measure that two measures that are very similar. One is type token ratio. So basically we divide the item types by the tokens, and the higher it gets, the more diversity you get in the data, and entropy reflects the uncertainty of the data. Same, the higher it gets, the more diverse is the data. So when we compare characters, radicals, names with and without metaphor, what we see that characters, radicals, and names without metaphor all have higher diversity for males, while names with metaphor or have higher diversity for females, which kind of reflects the idea we think that there is more like female are more likely to be dehumanized in a way and be compared with something else, like flowers, for example, and that's where you get more metaphors there. Also, of course, it also reflects the social stereotypes. To close to the last two slides, so we also looked at the statistical significance of the subcategories to predict what we, a variable that we named here, well, in the data is named women ratio, but the idea is if a character is mostly found in female names, it has a high ratio, and if it's mostly found in male names, it has a low ratio. And the variables that significantly help to predict this ratio are for female names, beauty, and for male names, personal achievements and wealth value, which is again reflecting the stereotype that are still found in the data. To conclude, so the naming practices mirror stereotypes. So, for example, male names have the higher diversity as well. This reflects the traditional expectations, but this does change over time. So across time, as we have seen, this is different. So there is less focus on achievement for men, less emphasis on appearance for women, and new categories for neutral names that are used like function words or words that actually talk about equality. And that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you.
We thank you, Pacey and Mark, for your very exciting talk. And now we have 10 minutes for questions. So are there any questions already? Who wants to be the first person to ask a question?
Well, if nobody wants to ask, I have one for the previous talk.
Of course,
Okay.
please go ahead.
No, I think people are tired and it's always hard to have the first question. So let me start that one. So I was just a curiosity question. So
Yeah.
Did you contact the editors of, sorry if you said it and I missed it, but did you contact the editors of the book you mentioned, or is it something that you plan to do to see how to ask them how they plan, what is their plan and how did it change across time?
I haven't asked them, but I have thought about doing that in the future, particularly because we know that there's going to be a lot of changes next year with the changes in the laws. The laws specifically go against the advice that they've been given. So I suspect that there's going to be some changes or major changes, at least in terms of how they present the naming process. So that would be something that'd be interesting to do. I suspect that at least now, they definitely are making basically no changes on a year-to-year basis. It's almost all stylistic in terms of like different drawings. But it would be interesting to ask them. So I'm thinking about doing that. Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
I see, Ivona, you have a question, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to ask Mark and Pacey about the well, I have two questions actually. So this one I will start. The first one is about the generation names. I know it's not that related to gender, but that's something I'm kind of interested in. Are there still common in Taiwan, or is it more like within the nuclear family that parents try to unite names, or can you still see them through the entire generation? Can you comment on this a little bit?
Is there any common name, like the first character?
Yeah, like the example you gave.
Like
your family
in my family.
Yeah.
Actually, different family selected their character to be incorporated in their name. So, do you know? Can we see from if we don't know the family, or?
Yeah, can you recognize? So just if I rephrase the question correctly, it's do we still have examples of this of practice where the same members of the same family have very similar names that try to unite, right?
Yeah, like in the past, if I understand correctly, it was very common to have these generation names, right? Like
Yes.
One person would decide it for generations, like for 15 generations ahead of time or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't concern only the nuclear family, but the extended families. And so my question is whether this practice is still kept? I suppose not much, but I'd like to hear from you. And so whether it's still perhaps kept within just the narrow family circle, just within the nuclear family, or what's the situation now?
Okay, so I gave one example of actually is my family. So yes, it's still practice now. But how many percentage? I don't think there's a statistics. Maybe yes, we will find. We will search for that. And it depends really. Like if you have a tree, a family tree, or like a 族谱, how to pronounce?
Yeah, like a family.
Like family tree. And for example, in my family, we don't have a family tree, so I can only know the names of my maybe grandparents, parents, or even I don't know their names. But if one family, a big family with a prestigious family, they have a family tree, I think it's easier to have this kind of word, because on the one hand, they should keep their identity, family identity, and second one is they're very large, their family, so it's easier to distinguish their relation and the hierarchy.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, but I will wait, so other people can ask first.
There is a question in the chat, Anna. I'll read it out.
I didn't see that, but I will check.
Shall I read it out from Quen? Is it difficult? This is for PC and Mark, I think. Is it difficult to change one's name in China? Do these non-binary names you discuss are they mostly adopted by queer community members or by parents of newborns?
Okay, so firstly, we don't actually know how changing names rules in China. We are discussing cases in Taiwan, so there are rules, and we gave some examples. So actually, it's not difficult. Only you should propose your reasons. So if you want to change your luck, actually you don't have any certificate, but if you have someone you share the same name in one city, you may have some proof. So I think it's really flexible. You should just only propose some reasons. And the second question, adopted by queer community members or by parents? I think it's by parents, because I think parents, they just want to have this gender connotation for their babies, and I don't think it is really close to a queer community. Maybe yes, but we don't have this kind of data. Maybe will be interesting to do a field work to have queer parents and to see if their name correspond to our neutral name data. Thank you for your question.
So, are there any more questions? Maybe, Ivona, you want to ask your question, your second question now?
Okay, I wanted to ask about your data. Maybe you explained it and I just didn't catch it, but if I understand it, you use this annual statistics. Yeah, I think I've seen it. So the analysis, the semantic analysis you did, you worked with the top 100 names, right?
Yeah.
And it also says like how many people have that particular name.
Yes.
I was wondering whether you would get a different ranking of those semantic categories if you had data for the whole population. Of course, yeah. you cannot obtain it. I understand that it's difficult in Japan. I believe it's difficult in Taiwan. I'm just kind of thinking about this because I'm dealing with similar things. Because, for example, like the plant category, since the names are so diverse and there are so many names with very low frequency, and there are so many plants or characters, denoting plants. I believe that, for example, this category would rank higher if you had, a larger corpus. So I'm just wondering whether you were thinking about, how the statistics might change if, whether it actually represents the society as such, or whether it just talks about the top 100 names?
Yeah, so here I think I can. So that's one thing we would like to try to do, but getting the data might be a bit harder. But I can give you some experience I had from trying with data in Sweden, where you can actually get very easily the full data. So usually what we see that there is a typical ZIF distribution where, let's say, the few categories amount for the majority of the data and everything decrease. So, and there are a lot of categories after, but they amount for very small amount in the data. So I think the general trend, if I were to guess, I think it will not change that much, because the top 100 are more likely to account for a lot of the majority of the categories already. But yeah, it's still worth, I think, getting the data there. But at least with Swedish data, I remember there wasn't a large difference.
Because I tried this particular thing, the plants on Japanese names, and it did make some difference. But otherwise, I agree. And when you mentioned the curve, that's something statisticians who are not familiar with Japanese or Chinese names, they are always surprised what the curve looks like, right? That there is so steep, and then thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So, Jane, you have a question?
I have a question for Ivona and Giancarlo and Teresa. I know very little about Japanese. Hang on, I wrote it down. The graphic form of Japanese, and my question is, for gender-neutral names, is there a kind of completely new invention of a graphic form for those gender-neutral names, or are they a composite of graphic forms for names which are more gender binary? That may be a stupid question.
Giancarlo, want to start?
Okay. I think just to make sure that we're on the same page, in general, first there's a list of kanji you can use, or a list of the actual Chinese characters you can use. So the list has actually been increasing over the last couple of years. And in fact, it's actually a modern invention in the sense of prior to the post-World War II period, you could do anything you wanted. There were no restrictions. So it's actually a new thing to have restrictions, but the restrictions are also, becoming a little bit more lax. However, you're still basically choosing from one of 2,000 characters. But there's a lot of characters. It's like more than 2,000 what you have to choose from. But you can't just make a new character, is what that means. You can't say, hey, I want to have a new kanji that nobody ever made before. People did that historically. I mean, that's part of what happened when kanji came into Japan. They made new kanji that didn't exist in China. They did things, very funny things. But you can't do that legally now. So you have to work within the kanji that are available, the graphic forms that are available. However, you can combine them very freely. And that's the thing that's probably to me, the most salient characteristic of Japanese names is that there are structural sounds or, numbers of moras or syllables that make something sound like a name. However, you can pretty much make a name from anything you want. And Japanese in general is very flexible about what a name is. People don't have quite the same hang-ups as, does this sound namey to me? Like, I think for English, that's the characteristic of English. This sounds namey, this doesn't sound namey. If you name your kid Apple, people are going to say that's not a name, that's made up. It'll become a name eventually if enough people do it, but at least at the beginning, somebody's going to say that to you. And you're a lot less likely to have that for Japanese, just in terms of the way people feel about names. Not that you can name your kid Apple in Japanese and you won't be made fun of, but it's less restrictive. So I think you can be more creative, but in terms of making a non-binary name or making... I don't see people making those specifically. I haven't seen a lot of cases of them doing that really consciously. I think you probably could do a lot of research on that, and maybe Ivona has more stuff to say about this. But I think a lot of the names that end up being neutral or kind of end up being neutral by coincidence, or the sounds are the same, but then they choose very gendered kanji. So it's very, very complicated is the answer, unfortunately. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, or they simply, choose kanji which are not associated with a particular gender. Since, as Giancarlo said, there is such a range, they can choose from, well, 3,000 officially, but Giancarlo said maybe 1,000 or 2,000 because not every kanji is suitable for a name in terms of its meaning, right? So since there are so many combinations they can make, and now, parents try to make names that would be unique, that would be somehow, reflect their ideas about their child. They create these name selection stories, why they want, what this character means to them, what it says about the child and things like that. And so they create, they choose such various combinations that it's hard to tell whether the name is male or female because the name is simply not very common, not very frequent. So this is also part of the story. Then there are, of course, names that are recognized and as gender neutral, and those are those we talked about today. But then there is this great variety of names that are simply, have very low occurrence, and so there is not even the experience of telling. And in terms of the motivations, there are various. I don't know that much about it, but I have done some research. I've done some interviews with parents, some interviews with bearers of gender neutral names, and basically, as I mentioned in the presentation, sometimes it's a deliberate choice. Sometimes they don't even realize they chose a name that's not gendered. Sometimes they even give a name that's more associated with the opposite gender, and they found out only afterwards when the neighbors or people comment on the name of their baby and say, "Oh, you have a boy. No, we have a girl," or things like that. So it seems that gender is not often it's not one of the key criteria, and sometimes they just don't even realize that the name is not marked for gender. And another reason, which also I think Pavel mentioned in his presentation, is that often, they want to decide the name before the baby is born, now with all this care, and they want to prepare and do it, well ahead of time. And sometimes they don't want to know. They don't want to know whether they are expecting a boy or girl. So they choose a name that is not gender specific, so that they can call the name already during pregnancy, can call the child already during pregnancy. And once the child is born, then they choose the characters, and often they then choose gender specific characters. So the phonological form is not gendered, but then the graphic form is, or not. Yeah, sorry, I guess I talked too much.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna, for chairing that session so very well. Thank you. So we've actually squeezed out our open discussion session. I could probably take one open discussion question, and I would like to invite Shahid, who's made some comments in the chat throughout the symposium this afternoon, to ask a question, if Shahid is still here. Perhaps Shahid has had to go, unfortunately. Okay, so, Shahid says yes, but no question yet. So we're waiting for your question, Shahid. Would you like to ask your question? Okay, we're going to have to move on because I do want to hand over back to Ivona for closing the meeting. I think you have a few things to say in closing the meeting.
But no more discussion, no more questions.
I don't think we've got any others. I think PC has put something in the chat, but that was a follow-up question for you, I think, Ivona.
Yeah, so we can maybe do that later, but for the general discussion at the end, if someone would like to return to some previous presentations, or if someone noticed some things that kind of repeated or could be somehow made more general or something, nothing like that.
I've got lots of things to say, but I can't possibly say them in 4 minutes, and I don't want to hog the remaining minutes.
Because there's like one thing I noticed, I haven't prepared it as a question, but so I try to make it brief, but I think Carmen mentioned it, and then also maybe Anna or Maya, I'm not sure, but that, one of the things I noticed that gender neutral names are kind of more beneficial for boys, or that they tend to, that they're more frequent for girls, that they take boys names. Do you think this is, I know Lieberson's done a study on this, or we can find this in the literature, but do you feel it's still the same, or there are some maybe changes like in the latest years? Because in Japan we can see it also the other way around. We can see there are quite a few names that used to be female names, and now they are popular for both boys and girls. I think it's an interesting trend that I'd like to look more into. And I was wondering whether this, you could see also in other countries, or it's always, from males to females.
Well, in Spain, we have no doubt that the males that may be ambiguous become easily female, not male. That's something that happens with other things in life, like clothes and so on. But in Spanish, it is very clear that ambiguity is not it's not well tolerated, so it becomes female at last.
Thank you. No more comments or questions. So, well, then it seems that our symposium is almost over then, I guess. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I would like to express my sincere thanks to Jane for establishing the People's Names Research Network and organizing the symposium. I believe it's a great idea and a wonderful opportunity to connect people with who share similar research interests. I think it has already led to some interesting collaborations, and I'm confident that it will lead to more in the future. And so thank you for participating in this event, and I hope we will meet again next year, if not sooner, through other collaborations. So thank you very much, and I will now hand to Jane again.
Thank you. And thank you. I want to thank all the presenters today, all the people who have chaired the sessions, and of course the participants who have listened so intently to all our speakers, and I'm sure have generated lots of thought. So thank you so much. And with regards to the People's Names Research Network, if anyone has an interest in joining that network, please do contact me, and you can join the network. As Ivona has said, there are opportunities for all sorts of collaborations and connections to be made through the network. So it's a nice thing to have, and I'm very pleased it's going so well. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming today, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.